We all know that Hoyoverse is currently facing another backlash from the community, but as always, there hasn't been any response from them yet. So, no surprises there. But today, we're going to talk about something different. Not about leaks, not about new characters, but about Hoyoverse itself. About every backlash or controversy they've faced so far, and what they did in response. Because if you look closely, every major controversy slowly changed how Hoyoverse handled its community. And one backlash in particular completely changed the relationship between Hoyoverse and the player base forever. So let's get started. Back in 2020, almost nobody expected a Chinese anime-style gacha game to completely take over the gaming industry. Then Hoyoverse released Genshin Impact, and within weeks, the game exploded worldwide. But what's interesting is that Hoyoverse's rise wasn't smooth at all, because almost every year since launch, they faced a new controversy, a new backlash, or a completely new war with the community. And if you look closely, you can actually see how each controversy slowly changed the company's view toward its player base. The beginning, Resin complaints. When Genshin first launched, players were shocked by how beautiful the game looked. Open world, anime-like graphics, a new elemental combat system, and a free game that looked A. But after the dreamy phase ended, players started noticing a problem: Resin. The game heavily limited how much farming you could do every day. You would run out quickly, and progression suddenly slowed down hard. At the time, many people believed Hoyoverse designed the system mainly to encourage spending. And honestly, the backlash was huge. Because if I remember correctly, during a Q&A session, the developers once said that they wouldn't increase the resin cap ever, or introduce a new endgame mode other than Abyss. And that made things even worse. Forums, YouTube, Reddit, Chinese communities, everybody was complaining. It genuinely felt like the entire community was united for once. But this is where we first learned how Hoyoverse handles criticism. They almost never panic immediately. Instead, they slowly adjust things over time. So rather than removing resin completely, or doing anything in a hurry, they slowly improved the system. They introduced a higher resin cap, condensed resin, better farming efficiency, and more quality of life updates later. And this became a pattern we would keep seeing again and again. Hoyoverse rarely abandons a system. They slowly evolve it instead. Then came the Zhongli War, and this was the moment Hoyoverse truly realized how powerful the community could be. In version 1.1, Zhongli released. The Geo Archon himself. Naturally, players expected him to completely dominate the game, but after release, people thought he was weak. His damage felt underwhelming. His utility felt incomplete. And for an Archon, expectations were insanely high. And this is where things got really bad. The backlash became absolutely massive. Probably the biggest outrage in early Genshin history. Chinese players were furious. Global players were furious. Content creators were making videos nonstop. At first, Hoyoverse actually defended Zhongli publicly, but the backlash kept growing. And eventually, they gave in. Massive buffs arrived. Stronger shields, resistance shred, geo-resonance buffs, and scaling improvements. This was the first time Hoyoverse made changes to any character after their release. And that's how Zhongli transformed into one of the strongest characters ever made. And this controversy changed everything. Because players realized, if the backlash is big enough, Hoyoverse will listen. And from that point onward, every future controversy became even louder. Then came 2021, the anniversary disaster. By this point, Genshin had become a global monster. The game was making insane money, winning awards, and dominating social media. So naturally, players expected the first anniversary rewards to be huge. But when the rewards were revealed, the community exploded. And honestly, this is where the community completely lost trust for a while. People felt Hoyoverse was being unbelievably stingy despite the game's success. And this backlash became so massive that players started review bombing not only Genshin, but even completely unrelated apps and games. Even Google Classroom somehow became a victim. For a while, Hoyoverse stayed completely silent, and that silence made players even angrier. The 3 intertwined fates memes were everywhere. People were making videos non-stop, and the entire community genuinely felt chaotic. Eventually, they responded by quietly sending extra rewards through in-game mail, including items that were originally planned for a paid bundle. But the damage was already done. And this wasn't just a one-time scenario. It happens every year, and it will probably happen again this year. But most players have accepted that this is how they operate, so the outrage isn't as huge anymore. But it will still happen. This controversy created another important pattern. Hoyoverse often waits for outrage to peak before responding. Next, the Genshin has no endgame era. After the anniversary drama, another criticism started growing for years. Hardcore players began feeling like Genshin had no real endgame. Outside Spiral Abyss, there wasn't much permanent difficult content. And every time players ask for harder modes, Hoyoverse mostly focused on casual content instead. Exploration, story, events, and minigames. This created a huge divide in the community. Some players wanted difficult MMO-style progression. Others liked Genshin specifically because it stayed casual. And honestly, this was probably the moment Hoyoverse fully understood what kind of audience they actually wanted. Instead of turning Genshin into a hardcore game, they doubled down on casual accessibility. Even when they later added new combat systems and modes, like Stygian Onslaught and Imaginarium Theater, the game's core direction never changed. And honestly, from a business perspective, it worked. Because Genshin became massive partly because casual players felt comfortable playing it. Then came the representation debates. As Genshin expanded into regions inspired by real-world cultures, new controversies started appearing online, especially around skin tones and character representation. The Sumeru debates became enormous on social media, and later, Natlan discussions reignited everything again. Some players accused Hoyoverse of poor representation. Others argued the designs matched the game's artistic direction. And unlike the Zhongli situation, Hoyoverse barely responded publicly at all. No major statements, no dramatic redesigns, no public arguments. They simply continued designing characters their own way. And this showed something important. Hoyoverse only changes direction when they believe it affects the game itself. Not every internet backlash changes company decisions. Then Hoyoverse accidentally created internal competition. In 2023, Honkai Star Rail released, and suddenly, a completely different problem appeared. Players immediately noticed that Star Rail felt way more generous than Genshin. More rewards, more pulls, more quality of life features, and overnight, the community started comparing the two games nonstop. Ironically, Hoyoverse was now competing against itself. For years, Genshin players had complained about rewards and quality of life updates. Now another Hoyoverse game was doing many of those things better. And honestly, this comparison probably pressured Hoyoverse more than regular backlash ever did, because now players had proof that Hoyoverse could be more generous. And while Hoyoverse never publicly admitted it, a lot of players noticed that Genshin updates slowly started becoming more generous afterward too. Better quality of life updates arrived faster than before. It genuinely felt like Star Rail's existence pushed Hoyoverse to improve Genshin more aggressively. Next, Zenless Zone Zero and the TV mode problem. Then came Zenless Zone Zero. At launch, many players loved the combat and style, but one feature quickly became controversial: the TV navigation system. A lot of players felt it interrupted gameplay too much and slowed the pacing down. And this time, Hoyoverse responded surprisingly fast. Later updates heavily reduced the importance of TV mode and shifted focus toward direct gameplay. And honestly, this wasn't even the only example anymore. Even during the Nouvelette spinning controversy, Hoyoverse reacted incredibly quickly after community backlash exploded. Which is interesting because this showed something new. Modern Hoyoverse reacts much faster than early Genshin-era Hoyoverse. Probably because they learned how dangerous negative first impressions can be. Next up, the voice actor and AI controversies. More recently, Hoyoverse became involved in industry-wide voice actor disputes connected to AI protections. During the SAGA-FTRA strike, some English voice actors stopped working temporarily, and several characters eventually received new voices. This created another massive online debate. Some fans supported the actors. Others believed Hoyoverse had no choice if development needed to continue. And once again, Hoyoverse handled things the same way they usually do. Minimal public drama, minimal emotional responses, and continuing production quietly. At this point, their strategy was becoming extremely obvious. They prefer silence over public addresses. And finally, the war against leakers. Over the years, Hoyoverse also became known for aggressively targeting leakers. Lawsuits, cease and desist letters, legal pressure against major leak accounts. And unlike other controversies, this is one area where Hoyoverse never compromises, because leaks directly affect marketing, hype cycles, and future revenue. So while the company may bend during gameplay controversies, they almost never tolerate leaks. But we can't deny that they do allow some leaks to keep up the hype, but that's what every game does. So here's what we learned. If you look at every controversy together, you can actually see the evolution of Hoyoverse as a company. Early on, they reacted slowly, because they probably didn't expect Genshin to become that massive. Then, the Zhongli backlash taught them that community outrage could genuinely threaten the game's reputation. The anniversary disaster taught them that silence can sometimes make things worse. Honkai Star Rail taught them that their own games can compete with each other. And Zenless Zone Zero showed that modern Hoyoverse now reacts much faster to gameplay criticism than before. But the most interesting part? Despite all the backlash, Hoyoverse almost never abandons its core vision. They adjust systems, improve quality of life, add compromises. But they rarely let the community completely control the direction of their games. And honestly, from a creator perspective, that's probably one of the biggest reasons they've stayed successful for so long. Because whether players love them or hate them, Hoyoverse always makes sure people keep talking. So looking at the current backlash, they probably won't respond unless it affects the game itself or their revenue drops. That's all for today. Let me know what you think about all these controversies and backlashes in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video!